victory tale. I have not figured out the secret to eternal motivation or waking up with optimism every day. On a considerable number of days, it feels impossible. It feels impossible to wake up and find beauty and wonder and be fascinated by the world. It feels impossible to look at situations and people complexly beyond what meets the eye. To me, on a considerable number of days, it feels impossible to look at the world around me, to draw from it, and to create from it. It feels impossible to put on those light-colored filters. This is not me telling you that it isn't, because it is. But I'm still going to stand here and we're going to have a chat about it. Why? Because I still believe in it, and if nothing else, it just helps to be reminded every now and then, right? So what I'm going to share with you is the idea of a light-colored filter. I'll skip the part where I tell you how complicated and difficult life can be. I doubt anyone here needs reminding. But there's something that tends to be a constant for me on my best days as my worst, right? The art and the science and so many other things that's the result of other people who pursued their passion, be it playlists I compile for a spectrum of moods, TV shows I binge watch, books I read, reread, and then reread again, or the art I scroll on Pinterest looking for. They've all got something in common, right? They all started off as someone who just imagined something in their mind and then went ahead and made it a reality. Now, a light-colored filter, it helps you sense some sense of wonder in things, to look at things complexly, and from it draw this feeling of looking up at the sky, right? Now, I'm intentionally not calling it optimism or flat-out positivity. I'm calling it light, because that's what it is. Not necessarily good or bad, just light. And light by nature just brightens. It's like an athlete doing cardio or weights or a musician playing scales, right? It's practice that over time becomes second nature. Now, I'm still not perfect at it, and most days I forget. Not just how to do it, but to do it at all. But just like how practice works with anything else, once you've made yourself do it, actively stepping into those roles of putting on those light-colored filters, it becomes somewhat involuntary. And my gosh, like it truly does make life better. For me, my valiant, persistent attempt at keeping light-colored filters on begins with art, right? So that's what I'm going to share with you. When I say art, though, I'm really talking about the passionate pursuit, not just the Mona Lisa or the Moonlight Sonata, but the passionate pursuit which is ever so often acquainted with art, right? It's passion that got us the Hubble telescope, that took us to the moon, everything in between and beyond. So how important is it? How important is art? John Green, in his latest book, The Anthropocene Reviewed, makes this absolutely beautiful observation, right? Where he says, these communities, they hunted and gathered, and there were no large caloric surpluses. And so every healthy person would have had to contribute towards the acquisition of food and water. And yet somehow they made time to create art, almost as if art isn't optional for humans. And that speaks for itself. And so we've established a couple things. We've established that life can be complicated, to say the least. We've established that art is necessary to consume and to create. And we've established that there's something called a light-colored filter. Like I said, for me, art is how I first got to creating my light-colored filter, right? It was me devouring interests and drenching myself in them, even if I was occasionally using them as diversions and distractions. It wasn't necessarily about developing a skill so much as it was about just finding some kind of passion. Now, the problem is that far too often for it to be okay, we limit ourselves when we're consuming, and so much more so when we're creating. We dismiss consuming because the art that we sometimes find isn't renowned enough, and we stop ourselves from creating because we just don't seem to believe that we have it in us. J.S. Mill brings this kind of interesting perspective on the truth, right? About how the truth is scattered and fractured, as opposed to the usual view of the truth as untouched and whole, how it lies in varying degrees in most things. Now, in my opinion, what Mill says about truth can be applied to art and by extension to life as well, right? Wonder and beauty and creations deserving of our fascination are not exclusive to a single group of people who primarily identify with it. What deserves our fascination is not singular, limited, and faultless. What deserves our fascination is it's fragmented, it's infinite, and by extension, it's everywhere. Music is not just meant to be on stage in front of tens of thousands of people or on the radio or on CDs. Songs are also just meant for the shower. It's easy to agree, to remember that human nature is creative. It's also easy to forget that we are said humans and that we contribute to humanity. It's easy to see creations everywhere and feel it as external to ourselves. It's easy to think about the art that comes from the comfort of our bedrooms, that's sketched on the edge of our textbooks, recorded on our phones, or scribbled on the back of grocery bills as insignificant. It's easy to feel as if the art that rose from our amateurity is invalid. One of my favorite artists and really popular figures overall is Hosier. Now, to those of you who don't know him, he's this singer-songwriter who's written and created a range of music on really a spectrum of topics with this beautiful common thread of theme of like humanness. I'm going to stop myself because I can go on for days. It's really a talk of its own. But to also commit a grave injustice, he's the take me to church guy. Now, there's a lot of what I'm saying today which is rooted in what I've learned from him as from a lot of other people. But there's something he says in particular in one of his songs called Sing to Noise Making, where he says, you don't have to sing it right, who could call you wrong? Put your emptiness to melody, your awful heart to song. You don't have to sing it nice, honey, sing it strong. At best you'll find a little remedy, at worst the world will sing along. And my gosh, was he right. Art is not diminished by being used as a muse, by having inspiration drawn from it. Art is not offended by mediocrity because art does not recognize mediocrity. Art is almost binary in that it either exists or it doesn't. And just by being created, by being brought to existence, art grows. Your art, regardless of how good it is, contributes to the bigger body of art, and that is the wonder, that is the win. Art is so much bigger than you and I and our little contribution, and yet it suffers without it. A vast majority of human history will evade most of us. Each of us will die long before we get to even begin to experience the wonders that humanity has collected over its time, right? But all that really does is ensure that even on our worst days, there's more to be found, more paintings to gaze at, more underground independent bands to find, more science to learn, and from it there's going to be more to create. Regardless of what it is that fuels your fire, be it arts, science, music, dance, theater, poetry, literature, whatever it is, as John and Hank Green would say, two more of my favorite creators, by the way, be unironically excited about it. You being devouringly passionate about something is far more important than the actual subjects of your interest, provided you're not hurting anybody. Because after all, we're only really going to get to experience a minute fraction of all of this, and you might as well make the most of it. And to that I'm going to say, surround yourself with people of passion, bear your own passions on your sleeve, and live vicariously through everybody else's unironic excitement and make sure you bring yours to the table. My life is truly not extraordinary. I do not have some extravagant, novel-worthy backstory. My life is no different to yours. Trust me on that. I am not miraculous. And yet I kind of am. My life is extraordinary. So I go home to my apartment, right, and I'm making myself dinner. I open up my steaming rice cooker and I see how the basmati grains have swollen, and I see there are little wells where the water had bubbled up. The grains of rice, they curve and they circle these little wells, and I'm staring at it and I suddenly see Van Gogh's Starry Night in my basmati swirls. The books that I've ordered online have come in the mail. I bring them up to my apartment, right, and I rip open the packaging. I open them up and you smell that new book smell, right? And I'm writing my name and date on the half-title page. I'm flipping through the book. I'm far too excited for a book. I'm flipping through and I notice how my name is actually indented a couple pages over. I flip over and I feel my signature on my fingertips. And I find myself thinking about life and people and hoping that my imprint is somehow good and strong. I look over to my balcony, right, and I see my flower pots, and in them I see there are flowers turning to the sun, there's petals falling off, there's leaves dying, a lot of them, there's wilting and withering, there's birth and decay. There's a metaphor to be found here somewhere, right? Life is the art. As Rainer Maria Rilke says, if your everyday life seems to lack material, do not blame it. Blame yourself. Tell yourself that you are not poet enough to summon its riches. For there is no lack for him who creates and no poor trivial place. And so what? Sure, the world is pretty amazing once you stop to look at it. So what? Why bother? Yeah, the world is pretty amazing once you stop to look at it. But as amazing, arguably, possibly even more so, are humans. People are unfathomably fascinating. Behind most things that you find fascination with, there lies humans. Now, someone here is bound to think, you know what, Nishalya? No, nature is pretty amazing on its own. Yes, it is. I will not disagree with that. You will not hear me disagreeing with that. But who told you that? Yes, it's pretty amazing that the stars on Orion's belt are light years away and they may not even exist anymore, but we won't know when we look up at the night sky because of how far away they are. But it was us who spotted this vaguely human-like figure in the sky, called them Orion, spotted 3 stars along what would be their waistline and called it their belt. It was us who then used this and so many others to navigate the land and the seas and place ourselves in the universe. It was us who then identified the individual stars, named them, mapped them on the cosmos, built telescopes to see them, and then wrote books about them. It was my friend who told me that once you've seen Orion's belt, you're going to look for it every single time you look up at the night sky. He's been right so far. The point is that humans are incredibly interesting. And for me, remembering that has helped me remember that people are also incredibly complicated. It is our complications that make our fascinations possible. It is we who identify the world, who look at it, and then identify it as fascinating. Without us, the world is just there. And so I say, turn to art, turn to passion, breathe in this accumulated sum of art and knowledge that humanity has collected over its many millennia, and before you feel entirely confident, step out and breathe out your own. Let the healing, the joy come through the passion and reroute whatever negativity towards the passionate pursuit. Remember that there's always going to be more to find. Make sure you turn yourself to curiosity, turn yourself to art, romanticize life and the wonders of humanity. And I know this sounds a little, overly optimistic, but I'm telling you it's not. Just try to fall in love with life.